Good afternoon. This is Martin Cody with Cellar Angels, and we are here tonight to have some fun. Many of us are now sequestered and sheltered in place, not by choice, but actually by directive from local, county, or state governments. And the economy is getting crushed. The business sector of every single business sector is likely not going to be the same, and nowhere is this more felt than perhaps outside of healthcare than the hospitality industry. And a big part of the hospitality industry is wine. So Cellar Angels is always interested in finding a silver lining. And so what do we want to do? We're going to get knocked down, but we're going to pick up our glasses and we're going to get back up, and we're going to see each one of us through this. So together we can make this a very, very palatable and worthwhile experience, and we're going to do it with the beverage that we love and that is near and dear to us, wine. So if you're going to shelter in place together. And I am honored to be kicking this off tonight from Cellar Angels global headquarters and world studios, also our living room. And we are here this evening with a fantastic Cabernet producer who is actually in his home in Colorado Springs, and that is the one and only Chad Angelo of Angelo Cellars. Chad, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
This is going to be our effort to shelter in place and flatten the curve, and we're going to do it with great wine. There's no better beverage in the world. We are thrilled to be able to do it. You can call me your host, your MC, Dante, Commander, CEO, President, tech geek, wine nerd, I don't care. We just want to do this together, make certain we're all surviving, make certain we've got some comfort, some communing, and see if we can share and get through this. Chad and I tonight are going to talk about Cabernet Sauvignon, the Cabernet Sauvignon that he makes, and we're going to take a ton of questions. So if you've got questions, hit us up on Facebook in the comment line. I can already hear and see people posting away. So I'm going to try not to bump the table because then the camera shakes. And we may, if things go terribly off track, we may actually debate the meaning of San Diego. I can't, there are no guarantees. So Chad, let's get together and cheers. I just saw you take a sip, so I might as well go to that.
Cheers.
And now I mentioned you're in Colorado Springs, which seems odd for a person making wine in Napa Valley. So talk to us a little bit about why you're in Colorado Springs, and then we'll get into a little bit about Napa Valley.
Okay, I've lived in Colorado Springs since 2000, and I moved here because I used to be an aerospace engineer and program manager with the Boeing company. And back then I was still doing engineering. So that's how I got to Colorado. After that, I started getting more and more into the wine industry. So with the high taxes in California, I figured I can live cheaper other places and fly back and forth cheaper. So I don't have to be out there all the time, day in, day out for the wine. So it kind of works. So I kind of get the best of both worlds of living in Colorado and getting to go to California all the time.
So an aerospace engineer at Boeing, did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
And so where did you go to college?
University of Missouri in Rolla, Missouri, to all engineering science school. And
go ahead.
That's where I kind of got into wine, because most people don't realize, but Missouri is the 7th largest producer of wine in the nation by state. There's a large German population that's settled in that area. And actually Missouri has the oldest and first AVA in the United States.
Now that I did know, but the 7th largest factoid I did not. And it surprises me that they are producing wine there. I would think genuinely more they'd go with the beer, or there might be there's I think a small company called Anheuser-Busch that might be headquartered there that probably had a little bit of that beer influence.
Yes. No, there's a large German population that settled there years ago. and it reminded them of the Rhine in Germany.
Oh, sure.
The rivers and the bluffs.
Yep. That's actually very apropos. The college there, that's where you got a little bit of your kind of bit by the wine bug a little bit. How did that happen? Because you were probably one of those guys at an all engineering school of very, very smart people. So was this some sort of thing to let off steam or just go tasting around the area? How did you get bit?
Got bit because we were poor, couldn't afford much, and it was free tastings at the wineries back then. So we could go to, there was probably 5 wineries right within 5 miles of our college, and we could go and drink for free to taste it. And that kind of got me interested in what was happening and so forth. And we could see the vineyards right along the highway. So that kind of got it started for me.
And was there some sort of a matriculation from Missouri German wine, if you will, to a path where you had better wines, and all of a sudden you realized, wow, there's actually a lot of complexity here, a lot of things that I want to get to know, and walk me through that aspect of moving up the ladder, if you will, from a sophistication and appreciation perspective?
Actually, I lived in Missouri after college for several years, and then I moved to Dallas, Texas. I relocated with McDonnell Douglas and Boeing down to Dallas. And Dallas is really where I learned more about the food and fine wine. I don't know why they put kitchens in houses in Dallas, because you have to have a reservation on a Tuesday night for dinner at most restaurants down there. So I also met some friends that they did a lot of charity event information with wines in wine stores. And I would go to all of their events, and kind of got me into finer wines, and realized, around the world, there's a lot of different things too. And that got me started there.
And when was your first trip to wine country as we know it here in the United States, California and Sonoma and Napa? What year?
Napa was, let me think, 1996, if I remember correctly.
Okay. And you grew up in Southern Illinois. You went to college in Missouri. You then went to the extremely mountainous area of Dallas.
Yes.
What was it like for you to then go to Napa Sonoma region and see that? I want to compare and contrast that to my first experience out there.
Yeah. Well, Missouri, we have little mountains and rolling hills and a lot of rivers and stuff. And then, Dallas is pretty industrial. It's a big city of a lot of concrete. So, and Illinois farmland's totally flat. So I thought Napa was absolutely gorgeous. You got 2 mountain ranges on each side of you, 30 miles to drive up and down, seeing beautiful vineyards and wineries. And I got big into the food when I was out there. That was a big thing for me too, was realizing how much great food, and marrying the food and the wine in Napa was that's the ultimate for me.
It's funny you say that, because I was very much the same way. Grew up obviously in the Midwest, in the Chicagoland area, and went to school in your state right now in Colorado, because I visited when I was in high school, and I looked around and thought, oh my goodness, this is the prettiest land I've ever seen in my life, with the Colorado Rocky Mountains. Then you go to California and you drive across the Bay Bridge or the Golden Gate Bridge, and you work your way up to wine country. And you're right, it takes your breath away. The bucolic hillsides, then you see the vineyards off of both sides of the car. And it just is a almost sedate, serene ability to enter into the valley. And then the food, the hospitality, it's not difficult to want to make that your passion and your life's hobby. What is the name, by the way? We have a person asking, what was the name of the AVA in Missouri?
Oh, now you're pushing my memory buttons. I think it was St. James.
Okay, because this person thought it might have been Augusta. Does that ring a bell?
Augusta is one of them. There's a couple cities, St. James, Augusta, and Herman are the three main towns that have wineries in them and around them.
Got it. So you get to Napa in 97. Actually, we were in Napa in 97 as well, so our paths may have crossed. And you decide as an aerospace engineer, hey, this looks good. I can do this. Well, when was that path of cognition and synapses firing that, yeah, let's open up a winery?
Yeah, no, it wasn't that easy. I got into the wine for several years, and after I moved to Colorado, I was actually involved in another winery down in Temecula, California.
Sure.
Big wine region down there, about 35 wineries. Anyway, I got roped into investing and got put on the board of the company. And actually, I was one of the 8 people that built the winery from scratch. We did it the stupid way. We started from no vineyards, no nothing, and planted the vineyards, built the building, the whole bit. And we signed our loan 3 weeks before the crash of 2008 stock market.
I have another message that just came to me. I'm listening to the studio in my ear. So post-production is telling me that there is a wine lover in Colorado that would like to send their appreciation and thanks to you for actually personally delivering their wine order several months back. Not going to name names because they didn't sign a release or a waiver. And and by the way, Boeing and McDonnell Douglas are not sponsors, but if they want to be, we'll consider that. They're fairly well-established companies. So you did it the wrong way, and it's funny, kind of the accidental winery person decides to go in, make an investment, and start from the ground up. And then what was the epiphany? And why Cabernet?
Well, first, I got bit by the Napa Cab bug when I was out there. I just love Napa Cabs. I think they're the best in the world. I think they represent the best that Cab can be. I know most people think of Bordeaux and Napa as the 2 prime places for Cabernet, but I prefer Napa's. So when I was doing all this stuff with the winery in Temecula, I found the ability and people to let me try to make a first barrel of wine in Napa. So they hooked me up and we made 1 barrel and kind of started at the top. We got Tokalan grapes for my barrel.
All right, well, let's back up. 2 questions there. For most people that they don't know how many cases are in a single barrel.
25 cases of 12 bottles in a case.
Perfect. And Tokalan. You and I know what Tokalan is.
Yeah.
And it's, I always try to find things that people can relate to. So Tokalan is, I would say from a real estate geography standpoint, it's up there with another place that we're going to talk about here in a little bit, but it's kind of Rodeo Drive. It's kind of the Hamptons, those sorts of marquee type of real estate. Tokalan grapes.
Yeah.
Tokalan has been around for what, 80 to 100 years? Was it one of the first?
Yeah.
The history is pretty impressive. Okay. And so how on earth did you get your hands on some of that fruit?
Well, it helps to know people. Back then, Tokalan was, prominent, but it wasn't like it is today. And it wasn't at the price point it is today now. So we got it. The first time I've made wine, matter of fact, they sent me the blending components through FedEx to Colorado so I could blend and put what I wanted in it, which I'd never done.
Right.
And so we did it. I sent him the thing. Next time I was out there, we blended it, put it back in the barrel. And then 6 months later, we bottled it. And then we started tasting it, and people really liked it. I'm like, well, it's the first time. They're being nice. So, but we submitted it to the San Francisco International Wine Competition in 2008.
Right.
and won double gold medal with it.
That's
So that
outstanding.
was the next fight.
Well, you submitted it in 2008. What vintage was it?
2005.
Okay. And 5 was a great vintage. So, but
Yes.
still. Now, did you chalk it up to beginner's luck, or were you just, that was when you rolled up the sleeves and said, okay, let's dial this in and get a little bit more sophisticated. I'm really having a good time.
Yeah, I enjoyed doing it. The notoriety, of doing beginner's luck maybe, but I kind of liked what I was doing. So,
Sure.
So 2006, at that point we didn't know how good it was, but 2006, I decided to go ahead. I did 1 barrel, and we went to the famous Howell Mountain region.
Right.
And did a barrel of Howell Mountain Cabernet. And then it's just exploded since then.
That's outstanding. And it's so fun, I would imagine, as a winemaker / artist, to determine what you're going to put in the bottle, to be able to pick and choose from a tapestry of fruit sources. You had To Kalon, you go over to Howell, very far north in the valley, and famous for some of the great cab producers up there, Viator, Dunn, and those sorts of folks. And it has a staying power. It has some force to it, but it also, a lot of the Howell Mountain cabs require some age, and they just somewhat tannic to begin with, depending upon where they are. But boy, do they cellar well, and they don't lose anything after 15 or 20 years. It's impressive.
No, they're a 20-year wine easy in most cases if they're made quality wise to do it. But yeah, I've still got some of my 2006 in the basement. We're still drinking it. And
did not know that. That's good information to have next time we're in Colorado Springs. Thank you for sharing.
That's right. Yep. I still have some 2005, matter of fact.
Well, that you shouldn't touch that. I mean, the inaugural vintage, the launch, that should all be library stuff. It's going to be famous someday, more famous, and that's got to be fun to pull out every now and then. I can certainly understand that. So now we go from Howell, and you're still kind of producing some stuff, and it's a time to. Do you make the leap then, or when do you do that? Got it.
2008, we started ramping up into making more wine. We made multiple. We got sources from multiple places in 2008. So we did a Coombsville, and we also did Howell Mountain that year, and that kind of started the next thing. But in 2007, I got the bug to try Zinfandel and Syrah also. So we did cabs in and Syrah. We went to over to Sonoma, Dry Creek, got some Zin. Went up to Mendocino, got some Syrah.
Wow.
So and that just pushed us even further. So sourcing's the interesting thing in Napa.
Well, and I was just going to say, a friend of ours who has been with the Angels since literally year one, Cynthia Costco, who you might know, Cindy Costco.
I know Cynthia very well.
Yep, she says hello.
Oh yes,
and
her.
Yeah, this is what I'm a huge fan of with regards to the social side of things. So hello, Cindy. I want to chat a little bit about you mentioned food sources, which I understand is paramount to it. But when did you decide, or actually I'll back up a second. What was the thing that you discovered that you didn't know going into this, where you were like, oh my, expletive, this is a heck of a lot different than I had imagined? What were some of those discovery aha moments?
I think 2 of them that come to mind right off the bat was that in Napa, you can have grapes from one side of the vineyard to the other, and they can taste totally different. They can both be cabs. They can taste totally different. And then throw in the AVAs, you know, go to Calistoga versus Spring Mountain versus Mountain Veeder versus Coombsville, and the ability of what's available and how different those are. And they're 10 miles apart, and they
Sure.
can taste totally different. The other one was distribution. It's one of the hardest things to deal with in American winemaking, especially a small producer. You're dealing with, you know, the Silver Oaks and the Caymuses that they're making 180,000 cases. It's in every steakhouse in America, Republic or whatever distributor, the big ones, they have them and they're pushing the volume and so forth. And it's really hard for the little guy. And it's a tough thing.
It's interesting, this whole economic downturn right now. I mean, Cellar Angels was founded 10 years ago on the heels of the last Great Recession. And Denise and I, the co-founder, spouse, extraordinary person behind the scenes and behind the camera. When we founded the company, we actually owned a retail wine store at the time. And we were dismayed at the 3-tier system because we kept asking the distribution channel, hey, where is XYZ winery? Where is this winery? Oh, they only make 500 cases. There's not a chance we're going to carry them. There's not. And so when you go to the valley, and people don't really realize this until they get to the valley, and they start seeing the hundreds of wineries that are out there that don't have national distribution. And combined, give or take, Napa and Sonoma have roughly, and you know these figures, roughly 1,500 wineries, and about 90% of them produce under 10,000 cases. So to your point, there's no way they're going to get distribution in some of the major metropolitan markets without traveling to every single one, and then that becomes cost prohibitive. And also, they don't have enough wine. When you're making a barrel, it's a death by 1,000 paper cuts. And so we decided back then in 2010, hey, let's do something about this. Founded the company. Now here we are, sheltered in place, 10 years down the road, and we have to help these small wineries because that's the bread and butter of the hospitality industry, or at least part of it. And so that resonates with us, helping these folks. It's kind of like, for lack of a better analogy, a farmer's market of fine wine. So you talked about being able to source fruit from different areas within the valley, and it's no different than going to a farmer's market and buying your produce versus the millions of produce rows that are in every single grocery store, big box store, and that sort of thing. So I love the small producer in wine. I love the small producer in produce. I love the small independent restaurant tour that is pursuing a dream. So those are the folks that we try to support at Cellar Angels. So that resonates with us. So we appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, it's tough from a distribution standpoint. Nearly impossible because it's unless you get 99 points or make 100,000 cases, you're kind of SOL.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
When you source your fruit now and you're making a Cabernet and you're making, I'm a little bit partial to the Cabernet you make because it's higher elevation fruit from arguably one of the most renowned vineyard sources in the world. And before we talk about that, what are some of your absolute favorite foods to pair with Cabernet?
First of all, red meats, grilled red meats, smoked meats, root vegetables, love it. I'm even into the hot and spicy stuff. So some Mexican food, I do with it if they're strong enough to hold up to it. That's my thing.
So basically any animal that has red meat that you can kill and put on the grill.
Yes. Yep. That's me.
There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so now that you had 3 or 4 years of sourcing fruit, and it's funny you mentioned that one side of the vineyard, being Cabernet, can taste completely different than the other side of the vineyard, and that can often be 100 yards away, and it's totally different from a standpoint of what it tastes like. The only thing I can even relate to that here in the Midwest is corn, because obviously it's a row crop. But when you're driving through tons of rows of corn on the road, and you see, oh, that section over there is not as developed as this section over here, you know that those are all going to taste completely different. And I see that in the valley. But when you had your exposure to the wines and you got your exposure to a lot of the AVAs, why did you settle on rather Stagecoach?
Well, first of all, Stagecoach is a big name in the wine world of Napa, recognized for quality. So there's a lot. I know there's over 90 wineries that use Stagecoach in their wines. Now, you're not going to see Stagecoach on every label for everybody that uses it. And most people will be surprised. There's some very big names that use Stagecoach in their wines, but don't tell you. The small producers, we do, because it's a niche for us to show what we can do and what Stagecoach can be.
Sure.
And I think that the small producer is providing a service in that of showing what Stagecoach can do by 40 or 50 small wineries and winemakers of how they can tweak it from one year to the next to make something totally special.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point with regards to Stagecoach as a vineyard source, because it is massive. And I think, and someone's going to correct me, I'm sure, and I hope they do, but I believe the overall Stagecoach property is about 1,300 to 1,400 acres. They have 600 acres or so under vines. And so when you think about 600 acres, give or take, that's a lot of vines. That's a lot of sources. So it's not surprising that 60, 70, 80 sources or wineries actually source fruit from there. And it's also, as I mentioned, it's not valley floor fruit. So walk me through or talk to me about kind of the topography changes, the tapestry that is laid out and where it is, because when you can talk about it, but until you actually see it, and for the first time, you realize just how impressive it is. It's something to behold.
Yeah. It's located just northeast of downtown Napa on Silverado Trail. And you go to Soda Canyon Road and head up the mountain. Now, we're talking mountains of 2,000 feet, not where I'm from, where they're 14,000 feet. But anyway, Stagecoach goes from about 600 or 700 feet above sea level to 1,400 maybe. So it's not at the top, but it's not at the bottom. But it's so big, it goes across Pritchard Hill and Atlas Peak areas on that mountain.
Well, see, and that's an interesting aspect there, because you just mentioned two other great areas. And Pritchard Hill, I would put in that kind of hallowed ground category that we were talking about earlier. You've got Colgin, you've got Continuum, you've got, who else is up on Pritchard? Brian Family sources some stuff from there.
Yeah.
And so there's a who's who of wineries up there, a murderer's row, if you will, on Pritchard Hill. And the fact that Stagecoach kind of covers some of that is fairly impressive. And then it goes all the way down to Atlas Peak, which is also, again, more mountainous, rocky, wonderful different soil complexities with 10 or 15 different soil types contained in a very small area. I mean, it's an incredible complex area, which leads me to kind of wonder, are there any specific flavor profiles that you can get from Stagecoach that are typical, or is it, I mean, I know this area's got red clay. This area's got some limestone. This area's got sand and loam. It's all over the board. What does that kind of partake and evolve into from a wine standpoint?
Well, knowing the blocks and who uses what is kind of paramount if you're looking for a specific profile. But the thing I like about Stagecoach, it has volcanic soil also, which gives it a bit of a richness, a little rawness to the wine when it comes out. It's kind of like Howell Mountain in a way, because Howell Mountain is very volcanic in nature with the soil. And that volcanic comes through the grapes and into your wine, and kind of gives it a ruggedness to it, a little bit of grit. And it's not as maybe polished as some of the valley floor stuff.
Right.
It doesn't have that. So that's what I'm looking for. And I like that about the Stagecoach. And most people, when the Krups brothers started, they bought the land back in the early 90s and started planting it like in 94 or 95. And most people thought they were nuts because it's up in the middle of nowhere. It's very mountainous for, mountains of California. And they thought, why would you plant nearly 1,000 acres of grapes? I mean, it's the largest continuous vineyard in Napa.
Right.
And they're laughing all the way to the bank now.
They are indeed. They've got 270 million reasons why they're laughing.
Exactly.
By the way, it's interesting because it's one of the, from our perspective, since we are built on helping the small producer grow, we're built upon helping wine lovers around the country get access to wines that they never have access. And you're a perfect case in point. Angelo Cellars is not a household name. It's not going to be on every store shelf, restaurant list, because you just don't make enough. And when you source fruit from Stagecoach, what does a ton of grapes go for from Stagecoach?
You're dealing in the $7,000 to $11,000 range for a ton of grapes. And a ton of grapes gets you about 2¼ barrels. Okay.
And then there's that age-old trick where you just divide by 100, and that's usually the bottle price. So it's kind of funny because there's a lot of fruit in Napa that's going for $15,000, $18,000, $20,000 a ton. And so when you think about $20,000 a ton, that's going to be a $200 bottle of wine. And so what you're doing is great because you're not a $200 bottle of wine. It just tastes like a $200 bottle of wine.
Yes.
And it's nice in my opinion. And by the way, I'm going to reiterate some housekeeping items. This is very inappropriate to be scratching your back on camera. I get that. We know wine, we know giving, and we know winemakers. So we're not made to be on camera. So I apologize for any of the faux pas. I want to talk to you about the wine that you have right now on Cellar Angels. We're doing something special, and I want you to show the bottle because I think the bottle is, to say it's a work of art is an understatement because it literally is a work of art. And talk to me about this vertical, because I think vertical tastings are, to me, one of the most fun things in wine. So go ahead and show the bottle if you can, and then talk about these vintages in particular.
Okay, this first one is the 2013 Stagecoach. This is the first year I made Stagecoach. And it's a 90% Cabernet, 5% Malbec, 3% Merlot, and 2% Cab Franc. And this was one of the first, second wine I've actually had rated, and it got 91 points from Wine Enthusiast magazine.
So, first of all, I love people that silk screen their bottles because it's just, this is a statement making bottle. Yes. But the nice thing about this bottle and your wines in particular is that not only does the exterior packaging make a statement, but then when you cork it and pour it, the statement is even made greater because the wine is just so special. Now, I know, and we were talking about the fact that the Krups brothers sold Stagecoach to a small little mom and pop startup called Gallo.
Yeah.
And how is that going to impact the 90 or 80 plus wineries that were sourcing fruit from there in a 3 to 5 year time frame?
I think what you're going to see is the small guys are going to get pushed out by Gallo as far as sourcing from there. Mm-hmm. Gallo has made comments in public that they're going to keep a majority of the grapes for themselves, and it appears they're going to have another brand of high-end wines under the Gallo name in some capacity.
Okay.
Krups Brothers will continue to get grapes. That was part of the deal. They're going to continue to get grapes to make their wines from Stagecoach.
Got it.
The deal was 2020 is the last year for me. I had a long-term contract, 2013 through 2020, and my contract is not going to be re-upped.
Okay, so
this legacy comes to an end.
Well, the Stagecoach portion of the legacy comes to an end.
Yes. Yes. We will search for other wonderful, unique offerings going forward. I'm excited about that. But I've loved the Stagecoach. But what we have to offer everybody through Cellar Angels is the first 3 years that I did Stagecoach. So the 13 was the first one.
Okay.
That I just showed.
Just an absolute great year.
This is 2014. And the 2014 is 94% Cab, 3% Merlot, 2% Malbec, and 1% Petit Verdot. And if you can see the label here, the silk screening, this is actually DNA strands is what we did on this bottle. So you can tell we do a different design every year for every bottle, and every year we have a new color. So 2013 was neon blue. We did all our bottles in neon blue and copper. So
you mentioned DNA strands. That would be DNA leads me to CDC, leads me to COVID-19.
Yep.
And I'm curious, as now I say COVID-19 and I have a strong propensity to touch my face and I don't want to touch my face. But tell me about the impact that the wine industry is feeling.
Well, right now, what's happened out in Napa and Sonoma, well, all of California right now, tasting rooms are shut down. So visiting a winery in Napa, Sonoma, anywhere, you can't go in. You could probably run by and pick up a bottle, but that's it. You're not going to taste anything like that. They're still allowing us to ship wine. So if people are wanting to buy wine, call in orders, stuff like that, they can still ship wine anywhere. And actually, I've seen some numbers, and people are buying a ton of wine and having it shipped across the board with what's going on in America right now.
So, and I also heard that Auction Napa Valley has been canceled, which is, I believe, the second largest fundraising auction related to wine in the country. And that's going to be a shot to that region because all of the dollars from Auction Napa Valley go to the Napa region from healthcare facilities and those sorts of services that are in dire need.
Yes.
It's unfortunate, and I'm glad that they're still allowing shipping because many of us would argue quite aggressively that wine is an essential item. And so there's that component. And I love the vertical aspect of the tasting. And let me actually do another housekeeping item real quickly because now that there's a bunch of people on. Earlier this week, some basketball player named LeBron James tweeted that he needed a vino partner. So if anybody online knows how to connect Cellar Angels to LeBron James, King James has a foundation. We would be happy to partner with he and his foundation to use wine sales to help children in his foundation. So I'm certain that the social media gods and goddesses can take care of that connection. And then Ellen DeGeneres, if you're listening and want to help, anything you can do would be great. That's fine. So now back to Chad. If you have a fruit source, like you talked about Stagecoach getting gobbled up, and that's going to impact 70 to 90 different wineries, what does the future look like from a fruit sourcing standpoint for the small producer?
There's gobs of opportunities. Even, probably 70% of all the vineyards in Napa sell grapes even though a winery probably owns them and makes their own wine off of them, they sell grapes, and that's part of their money-making way of profiting in Napa.
Okay.
It can't. A lot of people need to do both to make it work.
Right.
So opportunities for small guys like me to pick up a few tons here or there is very reasonable, and there's plenty of sources to do that.
And I think it's interesting. There's going to be a silver lining in this nightmare that we're all in. And I don't want to say we need to get used to the new normal, because this is not normal. So I don't want to get used to this at all. Do I want to get used to talking about wine with winemakers? Absolutely. I'll do that 24/7, 7 days a week. But we have to, together, all of us, support the small producer. And whether that's the winery, whether that's the restaurant, whether that's the business on the street that you go get your coffee from that isn't a chain, let's support them when we are able to go outside again, because that's going to be the lifeblood of the economy. The small business, the numbers are staggering what the small business contributes from an employment standpoint, from an income and revenue generation standpoint to the world or to the United States economy. And for us, wine is the most near and dear thing in regards to that. So that is something I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of. This is not the new normal. This is just us dealing with a little bit of a curveball in the wine industry, and we will rise above this. We'll get through this.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And with he's an aerospace engineer, for crying out loud. We'll get through this.
Yeah, I can figure this out. Here's the third bottle of the vertical that's being offered through Cellar Angels. And this is the 2016, which is a unique blend in that it's 99% Cabernet from Stagecoach and 1% Petit Verdot.
Okay.
So,
question.
Yep.
Why not 100% Stagecoach?
I have to blend something in. I always do. In this particular one, I wanted to bring out the deep black cherry flavors, and the Petit Verdot did that. And it just took a little bit. With the 2016, you're going to get a tart, dried black cherry start on the palate with a hint of raspberry on the finish. Absolutely incredible.
Very nice.
So,
we talked earlier about kind of two things that stink about being a small producer. Let's flip it around and say, I mean, this is a tough business that you're in and that we're in. So give me some of the most gratifying items that just absolutely tickle you to no end, where you're just like, this is why I do this.
I think with social media, one of the biggest things is when people that have bought my wine send a picture from vacation or a celebration, birth of a baby, anniversary, something like that, holidays, and they've like, this made our meal. Thank you we've enjoyed the wine. You know, it's that warm fuzzy that, hey, I'm doing the right thing. You know, people are appreciating what I'm doing. They enjoy what's there, and they're using it. And I know, you know, these aren't cheap wines, and they're not necessarily everyday wines, but to pick these up and use them for special occasions in your friends and family's lives, I think that's great.
No, you're absolutely right. It's the social media aspect of stuff for old people like me and a younger person like you is amazing, because you get these pictures that people send and say, hey, this is the wine we got from Cellar Angels. Here we are on our boat and enjoying a sunset off this coast. And you're just like, no way. Yeah. And the beauty is that not only did they get it from us and we're helping a small producer, but they also contributed to a charity in the exact same process. And exactly. and that is a little bit humbling. And the vertical, yours is the first vertical we've ever offered, you know, across the board. So I don't think people recognize, or I want them to recognize, how special a vertical is, because it's a little bit like studying your child at certain ages. And sure, the 7-year-old has some promise, but a lot can happen between when the 7-year-old turns 10. And some of it's not that good. But that's what my parents used to say, by the way. I had a lot of promise. at 7, downhill from 10. But walk me through the vertical. I know you in kind of a brief synopsis of what we're going to get with each bottle side by side when they do their vertical tasting.
Okay, well, the 13, you're going to get that big cult Cabernet from Napa, the California cult Cab. 13 was big. Everything was big. The fruit flavors were big. The acidity was big. The tannins were big. It's settling down beautifully. It's balanced, but it's still got a lot of grit and tannins to it. So perfect steak wine for grilling.
Great.
The 14 is more in balance. It was more of a year of normal growing season. You're going to get some spice to it. So, roasted root vegetables with you put in your spices and garlic and rosemary and pull the thyme out. Use something like that to it.
Nice.
14 is also really good. Throw a half a cup in your red sauce for your spaghetti. It's a little expensive to do it, but hey, it tastes good.
But it'd be the best red sauce ever.
Yeah. And then the 16s is, like I said, it is tart, dried black cherry. And I can't bring enough out to say tart. A lot of times you get the black cherry and it's kind of a sweet or a normal. This is tart. It will pucker you up a little bit. But on the back end, it's got a soft raspberry flavor to it. So this Cabernet from Stagecoach for these 3 come from the same block every year. And they're that different when you do it. That's not what you're going to get when you buy a bottle of Prisoner. They have a flavor profile, and most people couldn't taste the difference between a 2016 and a 2017 because they're building it for that. I'm letting the cab do what it does, and I'm working with what the cab is that year. So you're going to get something unique every time with mine.
That is awesome. And anybody that objects to the Prisoner reference, send your letters to Chad. That was unsolicited. Dave Finney, great guy who actually launched that label. But no, that's what I think is so fun about vertical tastings. And it's interesting when you are in the wine industry, to do blind verticals is a blast. And it is so much fun to just go boom, 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 right down the years and taste what was happening that year with Mother Nature. See what was going on. Is this more muscular? Is it leaner? Is the fruit singing from the 13? Is it softer? Is it more approachable? Is it got some bite still? Does the tannin need to soften? I mean, it's get some friends. We're all sheltered in place. So now's a good time to have a vertical of wine sent your way. And silk screen bottles is really about a special way to do it. And I think we have one more question coming in if the booth is talking to me. It's not a question, it's really a statement. A customer says, I would like to marry the 2016. It's that good.
Oh, well, good. I think it's remarkable. I was really surprised. You put these in the bottle and you lay them down for a year and it's like, man, what's it going to be like? I know what it came out of the barrel. I know what it went into the bottle, but a year later, it's great to open a bottle and you see something unique and special is that. And I'm really excited about the 16s. We just started putting them out.
Well, Chad, this has been outstanding. And for those of you that have allowed us into your living rooms this evening while we shelter in place, we are humbled with that privilege. And can't say this enough. It is a beverage that brings people together. And there's no better way to bring people together than over a glass of wine. We're sheltered in place. Let's sip together. We're going to get through this together. We're going to see you on the other side. And we're actually going to see you next Friday at 7 p.m. So thank you so much for everybody. Be safe. Wash your hands. Don't touch your face. I'm better at saying that than I am at doing that. Yes. But be good to one another. Thanks so much, Chad. Thank you for everything. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.